Hi everyone, my name is Lindsey and I'm a bassist in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. This video is for CPS students while your schools are closed due to COVID-19. Today's video is going to cover shifting on the double bass and some playing in thumb position as well. So just to start off, I normally sit in orchestra, but I know that many of you stand, especially with straight end pins. So I just want to cover a little bit about standing position with the bass. So I personally use a bent end pin. I hope that you can see it in the video right now. It's designed essentially to help push the weight of the bass forward so that there's less weight on my thumb while I play. The straight end pin doesn't do anything like that to negate that weight, but you can still find a way to balance it on your stomach to try and keep as much of the weight off of your thumb as possible. Basically, to set up, I like to hold the bass out sort of an arm width away from myself and line the end pin up with my left foot on the floor. Then as I bring it back, I angle it slightly and just kind of find a place where it sits nicely between my belly button and my hip, just to the side. So once we've done that, I just want you to kind of feel around, make sure that the bass is balanced as well as it can be. Because today we're going to be talking about going essentially the length of the whole fingerboard. So we want to make sure that we have access to the whole fingerboard. So to start off, how do we shift, right? We want to make sure that our shifts are utilizing essentially the largest muscle groups possible. So we want to think about our shifts starting from our back. What that looks like when we take it to the bass is something like this. Right. We start the shift with our back, but we really lead it with our shoulder and elbow. So basically, if I were to show you a shift starting from A on the G string all the way up to D on the G string, we really want to see the elbow leading and setting us in the place we need to be to play the top D. And it's also on the way down back to the A. Our elbow sets us back up for first position, and then our hand kind of just snaps into place. I like to think about this motion similar to the way that you throw a frisbee, right? You're not going to just kind of flick the frisbee off with your wrist, right? You want to start with your back and you really lead with the elbow, and then at the last second, you're flicking the forearm and the wrist out. And we want to use a similar method for our shifts, especially larger ones, where we have to cover a lot more ground and need to move very quickly. So try this out at your bass. Don't press the string down with your fingers. But just try this out where you're leading with the elbow and it's kind of just pulling your wrist and your hand along. And then try specifically the shift from A to D. And right now, just kind of do one step at a time. Right, elbow, hand, elbow, hand. We want to make sure as we're doing this, right, we've maintained that nice C shape in our left hand. If we've collapsed down and our fingers are dragging on the fingerboard like this, it's a lot harder to shift. And then practice making it a little bit more fluid. And then even faster. And so this is introducing sort of a glissando, which we'll use later on in the video in an exercise. So elbow is always leading. So let's practice that shift from A to D now with the bow. And I want you to use it, use your arm as in a glissando as we were just doing. So we'll use one bow from A to D and another back from D to A. It'll look like this. Really take your time. Faster. So as we're shifting down, right, we want to make sure that we're able to keep the string engaged, but not all the way, right? If we're pressing down too firmly, we'll get stuck, right? So kind of try and find that middle ground where you're not losing contact with the string in your left hand, but where your thumb is still engaged on the back of the neck, right, but not squeezing. So let's do that shift again, and let's do it now where we're changing bow between the two notes. So it'll be one bow on A, one bow on D, and then back. practice that. It doesn't always have to be those notes, right? Practice, a half step at a time building up to that. But that just shows you in general the kind of motion that we want for our shifts in lower positions. So moving on to how do we find thumb position? So I want you to start off right in this position where our thumb is in the crook of the neck. And from there, we want to expand our hand open to where we have third finger on the string. Now I know that third finger is not a finger that we're used to using, and right now we're not pressing down the string, we just want it to be resting. Right, so thumb in the crook of the neck, open, third finger on the string. So what that gets us, it's the octave harmonic. Right, so that's a G, and then we have the lower octave G. So G, upper octave. Right, so that's how we find our basic thumb position. From there, we need to know, okay, how do I deal with the bass moving up into thumb position? You'll notice as I transition from third finger, replacing it with thumb, the bass comes to rest on my shoulder. So the way that we do that is actually from our hips, right? A lot of people, when they first start playing in thumb position, have a tendency to collapse their upper body. We want to make sure that we're not doing that. So the first step is to hinge at our hips and kind of push your butt out a little bit so that your upper body folds in a straight line like this. So just practice that motion with your bass, just so you can feel stable while you're doing it. Right, so as we do that, we push our hips back, and then the bass moves back slightly and our upper body comes forward slightly, but always in this nice straight line. When we come to thumb position, we want to especially think about a string kind of pulling our head up, always directing up and never collapsing down. Right, we don't want our back to hunch because that's going to cause a lot of pain and tension down the line. So push the hips back, bass comes in, right? And we had a third finger on this harmonic, now we replace it with thumb. So let's just do that a couple times. And then we push back, then replace with thumb. Okay, again, push back, then we replace with thumb. Right, it's similar to walking, right? You always want to have one foot on the ground, so you always want to either have your thumb behind the neck or the bass on your shoulder, and there's going to be a moment as you're transitioning that you'll have both, rather than, okay, now I need to get thumb position and then the bass falls, right? So always think about staying rooted to the bass, right? You want to be able to ensure its stability as you're shifting up to thumb position. So one more time, right? So now we have our thumb and our G, and it's basically taking the place of the open string, right? Just an octave apart. So in thumb position, the fingers that we use are a little bit different than our lower positions, right? Down here we're used to using 1, 2, and 4. Up here we use 1, 2, and 3. So I want to start out just playing the last 4 notes of a C major scale, starting on our G harmonic. So we'll have thumb, 1 on A, 2 on B, 3 on C natural. So a big thing to take note of when you're in thumb position, we really want to focus on this nice shape of our forearm here. We want to keep our wrist higher than the level of our forearm, right? We want to make sure that as we're in this position, our wrist doesn't collapse down like this, but we also don't want it up too high, right? Find a nice comfortable position where the wrist is just slightly above the height of the forearm and the hand. We also want to make sure that we're not resting the weight of our arm on the side of the bass, right? You can touch it, it's not gonna hurt you or anything, but if we have our arm weight in the side of the bass, then it's really hard to get the string down, right? Similar in these lower positions, we want to use our arm weight to our advantage to get the string down, and it's the same up here. So in order to feel that, just for a second, I want you to rest the weight of your arm on the side of your bass like this and just place your first finger on the string over an A. What we're going to do now is lift from the shoulder and the elbow to bring our arm into position, and as we do that, we want to feel the weight of the arm transfer into this first finger. We call this kind of a finger push-up. Right, so we bring this up, and as we do it, once it gets to the point that it's higher than this first finger, we can feel the arm weight transfer down in. But I'm not pressing down. That's the key thing, right? I'm not using my muscles to press the arm and the hand down. I'm just utilizing my natural arm weight to do that. Right, just give that a go. Try it out a couple times. Don't stress about it if you're not able to kind of let go of the weight. Everything is always, a work in progress. So once we're there, just check in with your wrist angle and your forearm placement. And we always want to make sure that we're keeping this nice round shape in our hand as well. Now, something that some people have very strong opinions on, right, is how we treat this first knuckle in our finger. Different kind of schools of thought have a lot of opinions about whether it should always be exactly curved like this, where you play on the tip of the finger, or just this knuckle collapse where you're playing a little bit more on the pad. And this is a really kind of personal choice, and you might use each in different situations. I personally, just because this is the way that I learned, I do collapse this first knuckle. But it doesn't mean that I've lost the structure of the hand. I just find it easier to support the weight of the arm that way. So I collapse this first knuckle in my first and second fingers, but not in my third. And then if you were to play with the curved fingers, it would look like this. So just, again, give each a go, whatever feels more comfortable. Don't do too much of this all at once. You might end up hurting yourself, so just take it a little bit at a time until you find what really feels comfortable to you. So let's play those last 4 notes of that C major scale again. Right, so we can see that we have this nice firm hand structure, and similar to the lower positions, right, when we're playing on pinky, we don't need to keep all of the weight into 1 and 2, right? We can transfer the weight forward. We can kind of roll into that 4th finger, and we have a similar thing happening in thumb position. Right, I've rolled my weight into the 3rd finger. These 2 fingers are still kind of just touching the string, helping to stabilize, but they're not pressing down. So just feel this rolling motion forward and back. Okay, so how do we get up into thumb position when we're actually playing, right? If we were just going to play the C major scale up from here, it would look like this. Right, and as we transition from F on our 4th finger up to G, that's when the thumb comes, or excuse me, the bass comes onto our shoulder like this. But if we want to kind of practice the shifts more fluidly and cover a lot of ground, there's an exercise called vomits. And I know it sounds pretty gross, but once you hear it, you'll know why we call it vomits. It might make you a little bit nauseated. But it basically starts in first position, and we practice using glissandos, right? These slides between notes to expand our shifts until we get to an octave or more. But right now we're just going to do an octave. So I'd like to start on A with first finger on the G string. So we'll start there, and we basically go 1 note at a time up in A major scale. So first it's A to B and back, A to C sharp and back, all the way up until we reach this top A, and then back down. So I'll show you what this exercise looks like using an A major scale and just my first finger. Worth of vomits, and you can do it on different fingers. To start off, I would just use 1 finger. Eventually you can transition, so you can go from 1 to 2 on the upper note and back to 1. Just a note, when you're using the 4th finger, when you transition into thumb position, you'll use 3rd finger. So I'll show you this exercise again using a B flat major scale. So starting in half position on 4th finger. And then when we get up here, we'll use 3rd finger. And so this is an exercise that kind of takes shifting to the next level in and out of thumb position, just to try and make the motion as fluid as possible, right? So just really focus on how you're transitioning from it, and don't compromise your technique to improve the bass's stability while you're still experimenting and learning with it. Remember, we're always hinging from the hips, pushing your butt back a little bit, and bringing the bass to you, right? The key is bringing the bass to you and not keeping this static and moving the upper body forward to meet the bass, especially when we're in kind of this lower part of thumb position. There should be a space between your armpit and this neck of the bass, right? We want to make sure that we're not collapsing down in like this, right? Standing tall, hinging, bringing the bass back to rest on your shoulder. You should be able to have it balance naturally on your shoulder and have both of your arms free. So that kind of just covers general shifting technique, both on the lower positions and then in and out of thumb position. So the nice thing about this position here, right, thumb position, where we have the thumb on the octave harmonic, is that in a lot of ways it's just a mirror of first position. So it's pretty easy to take melodies that we already know and transfer them up into thumb position. So I'll start with, you know, as basic as it gets, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and just show you it in first position and then in thumb position. Replicated exactly in thumb position. The only difference is that instead of using fourth finger, we're going to use third finger right now. And so the thing about thumb position that is different than these lower positions is that our fingers can cover more than one note, right? We're not kind of stuck, okay, each half step is one finger. So right now we're just going to play third finger on those notes, but you can also play them with second finger. Just as a starter to keep the hand kind of more consolidated and strong, we'll use third finger though. That you can transition into thumb position, and it also allows you to play across a couple different strings. Another thing that you can easily translate between positions are just some one octave scale fingerings. So starting with C major, we're going to add the lower half of that scale now. So in first position it looks like this. Or we can shift up to C, either way, but we have to move our hand slightly out of position. In thumb position, however, we can keep it all in the same place. So we'll start on the A string with a C on second finger. And different from the top part of the scale, right, where we have E with 2, this is going to be a low 2. So starting on the A, so again, to find thumb position, right, we have third finger on the harmonic, bring it to the neck, bring the neck to your shoulder. Thumb is now on the harmonic. Now we're on the A string. So on the A string, work your way up to C. So, right, we have C natural there. So now I'll show you how to play just a one octave C major scale in thumb position. Again, using our B flat scale. So we start with a low 1, right in half position on the A string. And this fingering will keep on exactly the same. The only difference is the open strings are now thumb, just on the harmonic. And then our B flat at the top, instead of fourth finger, is going to be third finger. So let's find our A harmonic again. And then just above that with a low 1 is going to be B flat. And then we play our scale up. So that gives you, between the C major and the B flat major, two kind of variations on how we can space our fingers in thumb position. B flat, we have half steps between each of the fingers. And then in C major, we have a whole step between thumb and 1, a whole step between 1 and 2, and then a half step between 2 and 3. So those are two just kind of starter positions for your hands. Another melody that you can play in thumb position, which is nice to get some real world context, is the third movement of Mahler's First Symphony. Is a bass solo, pretty famous because we don't have too many of them. And it might sound familiar to you, it might not. Most of the time in the orchestra, we kind of play it down here just to kind of ham up the vibrato and the shifts, but it sits really nicely in thumb position. It's something that you can play also as a duet with your friends if you want to, once all of this distancing is over. So basically the bass line that goes on underneath of it, which is actually played by timpani in the orchestra, is this. Just open D and A strings. So you can start that going, and if you want to play along with me, you can play this under the melody right now. This one's, again, pretty simple. It sits nicely in the hand. We have a half step between 1 and 2, but then that whole step between thumb and 1. So a little bit different from other positions. Something else just to note is this A harmonic that I used, right? If we open up our hand the same way we did down here, and then just replace, again, 3 with thumb, and then open again, you can find this harmonic. The important thing about harmonics is that we just have one finger touching the string, though. If I were to have thumb and third finger down, it creates a different one. Right, so you can play around with all of the combinations you can come up with across the strings, but for this, when we go up to third finger, move your thumb over to the A string, because that's actually the next note you'll need to play. So it'll look like this. Getting into it. A nice way to play an octave too, right? And then you have D and D on the D and G strings. So now you can finally play an octave in one hand position, which is nice. So feel free to try that melody at home. It's just 4 different bars, each of them repeats 2 times. And so to kind of put this all together, combining the shifting and the thumb position and everything, I wanted to play a quick part of a piece for you. This is the second movement of Civic's double bass concerto, just the opening section. hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found this video informative. Please stay safe, and we hope to see you soon.